Joining us now is White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby. Admiral, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be with you, Jack.
John, last week, the president met with the Israeli Prime Minister in the Oval Office for the first time in 4 years, and they talked about progress toward a ceasefire. Days later, the U.S. is sending warships and fighter jets to defend Israel from Iranian retaliation, and the region appears on the brink of a wider war. Did Netanyahu keep President Biden in the dark?
I won't speak to the decision-making out of Tel Aviv or to the Prime Minister in his office. I would just say a couple of things. Number one, we still believe a ceasefire deal is the best way to bring this war to an end. It's also, we believe, very possible. We still believe the gaps are narrow enough to close. The other thing that we've been doing since the 7th of October is making sure that not only Israel has what it needs to defend itself, but that this war doesn't escalate to become something broader, a regional war, a regional conflict. And that's what you're seeing us do, continuing this week by sending additional forces to the region. Look, when the Supreme Leader says he's going to avenge, we have to take that seriously. Now, I don't know what they're going to do or when they're going to do it, but we got to make darn sure that we're ready and that we have the capabilities in the region to be able to help Israel defend itself and, quite frankly, defend our own people, our own facilities, our own national security interests.
Well, to that point, it appears the president's frustrated with Netanyahu. Axios reported this week that Biden, quote, warned Netanyahu if he escalates again, he shouldn't count on the U.S. to bail him out, the U.S. official said. Leaking that detail to a domestic audience might send one message, but are you at all concerned that a foreign audience seeing that might be daylight between the U.S. and Israel and only embolden Iran?
We've been very, very consistent about not wanting to see this war escalate and get broader. We've also been very, very consistent about proving, not just with words, but with action, that we're going to stand up and defend Israel. I mean, on April 13th, when Iran launched 300 missiles and drones, the United States had aircraft, fighter planes in the air to knock them down. We've now added additional naval and air assets to the region to help defend Israel again. I think we've proven time and time again that we're going to support Israel.
And very quickly, because I have two other topics to ask you about, was the vice president briefed on the decision to send warships? Did she agree? And has she communicated to Netanyahu that she intends to continue Biden's policy toward Israel?
I won't speak to future policies that that the vice president might enact should she become elected. That's well beyond the scope of my expertise. But she absolutely was party and part of the decision to add additional resources.
This week, the Secretary of Defense rescinded the plea deal that would have spared the 9/11 plotters the death penalty. Did President Biden ask him to do that?
This was a decision made by the Secretary of Defense. It was an independent decision by him, certainly within his authorities, as in the chain of command at the Defense Department.
Well, the administration had a hard time defending it this week. I want to play for you some sound here.
We're going to talk to one of the families of the victims coming up here in 30 minutes. As you can best assume, they are not happy.
No, of course not. And I certainly, we recognize and understand the concerns that they've expressed.
Our hearts go out to the families who lost a loved one. We are determined to make sure that they get justice, these families get justice.
So is the president willing to let these terrorists escape the harshest penalty in the system of justice and let that be part of his legacy?
Again, this was a decision made by a convening authority in the military chain of command, an independent convening authority.
He didn't weigh in at all.
Secretary of Defense has the authority to change the delegation of that authority to the convening authority. I know that sounds kind of complicated, but he has the authority to do that. He did this on his own.
Did the president weigh in?
This was a decision made by the Secretary of Defense.
I didn't hear an answer. Okay. On the topic of consequences, a lesser plea for these plotters might have sent a message of weakness to U.S. enemies. Will the U.S. send a similar message about consequences to Russia after the historic prisoner exchange this week?
I think we already have. We've already got designation on Russia. We're telling Americans not to go to Russia. We have enacted sanctions using the Levinson Act. We'll do that again. And of course, we're trying to make people publicly aware of the risks of traveling to certain countries around the world. But make no apologies. We will make no apologies about bringing innocent people home. Far better to have those folks home than rotting in a Russian jail for crimes they didn't commit. So no apologies about making this deal. And for all the arguments about whether it was good or bad, the previous administration did it too. Twice with Iran, with Turkey, with the Houthis. I mean, these are the tough decisions that administrations have to make.
Finally, before we let you go, John, the president's in active talks to bring Mark Fogel home. Has he reached out to Mark's family this week? Have they spoken?
I don't have a conversation specifically between the president and the Fogel family, but the State Department, I know, has been in touch with the Fogel family in the wake of this deal. And I can assure them, as we have assured them, we were trying to get Mark to be a part of this deal. Tried on a couple occasions, and the Russians just weren't biting. Doesn't mean we're giving up. And every time you do one of these deals, Jackie, you'll learn. Okay. You get a little knowledge of the perspective of the other side. We're going to use that knowledge to see what we can do to get Mark home where he belongs.
John, thank you so much for being here. Admiral John Kirby, appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.